This reform package is comprehensive, it's practical, and it's balanced. It advances big ideas that Democrats support. It also promotes reforms that Republicans have believed are very important. It reflects common sense bipartisan changes that all of us recognize need to be made. It's a reform package that contains the kind of compromise that Californians rightly demand of us. And I want to put this in some context because if you talk about reform, we need to be saying to our electorate, why does this really matter? And so let's discuss why this really matters for a minute. The budget. When we talk about reforming the budget, Mark and I, Mr. Sony and I went through the committee process and we identified a number of goals that were really important. Getting a budget on time, having the members who support that budget really be accountable for it. Results should be promoted through performance. We should reflect long-term thinking in our budget process, and we should have programs we can sustain over time. So what does this package do? It calls for a majority vote and penalties if we're not on time. It calls for performance-based budgeting. It asks for a longer-term look at our budget so we can take that to the entire legislature and know what to expect in the future. One-time money will go for one-time purposes, and we'll have a program of paying as we go for our programs. Through the initiative process, in our committees, we discussed one particularly important change in the initiative process. And that change is to assure that when there's a new program or an expanded program proposed to the voters, there's also a way to pay for it proposed to the voters. And we're going to have that measure, which is contained in legislation by Senator Ducheney, work its way through the process. When it comes to the legislation that we all do every day here, the legislative process also needs to change to reflect California's most pressing goals. It needs to encourage more bipartisanship. And that process needs to contain much more vigorous oversight. So what does this package do? It calls on us to have a very conspicuous process of setting top priorities. It calls on us to reduce the number of bills we do every year so we have more time for the oversight we need to accomplish and so we can focus more on the most important issues. And it incentivizes bipartisanship by having extra bills be available when authors jointly author them across both parties. And finally, on state and local government, we've all discussed how that relationship needs to change to assure that the entity that's responsible for the service actually has the funding to support it. And we're going to have a committee that puts together an approach how to realign our services and review our fiscal management of the dollars that go to fund those services. Last thing I want to say is this. In our committees, the very first committee actually, we heard from Bill Houck. Bill Houck was the leader of the last effort to meaningfully reform California's Constitution. In 1994, California was enduring what up to then was the biggest fiscal crisis it had confronted for many, many years. And the legislature convened a commission to reform California's Constitution. But as Mr. Houck reminded us, it took 2 years for that commission to report back to the legislature on what should change. By that time, the crisis had dissipated, and the initiative for reform had been lost. Mr. Houck reminded us how important it was this time to take advantage of the moment we have and to enact these reforms now. So, as Mr. Perez stated, we don't confront these same problems in the future. That's the point of today. The time for action is now.